Today we are going to talk about how we can render Maya fluids with Arnold. So let's get into it. Here I have a basic pyro simulation. It's nothing much. It's pretty much the same as we did in the last video, the pyro simulation. But still I'm gonna show you my settings. So the base resolution has been set to 150, and instead of using the auto resize, I'm using custom parameters for the bounding box, which is 20 by 30 by 20. I've also turned on a dynamic grid for the temperature. That means we are using temperature. And apart from that, in the content details, the density channel has been pretty much the same. I've changed the density scale to 1, and I've added some noise in here. And in the velocity, I've added some swirl to 6, and in the turbulence, I've added turbulence strength to 150. Apart from that, in the temperature channel, I've also added some noise in here, and that's it. And there's one more thing that I've done, which is in the fluid emitter, that is the emitter rate, which it produces the particle per rate. So instead of using 100 particles, I'm using 1000 particles. So that's it. And yeah, pretty much that's it. So this is what the smoke looks like. I haven't touched the shading. It's pretty much the same, the default. So let's get into it. So I have a camera set up here just for a quick look, and I'm going to open the IPR. And this is what you get, a simple pyro shader, which is kind of inbuilt inside of our fluid shape, which is this fire shader. So I'm going to change this to the density, and I'm going to reduce the test resolution to 75. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is change the smoke color to something like maybe a gray, and let's reduce the transparency. And I'm going to stop this here because I want to visualize what's happening in here, because that will determine what we are going to get in the fine render. So I'm going to reduce the amount of smoke and the transparency. Before that, I'm going to add a bit more black in here. Let's make the smoke to a bit gray. Let's change the amount of transparency. Alright, this is looking good, and we are obviously missing out the fire detail here, so I'm going to add some more input bias in here to something like this. Right, so this looks quite good. And if you render this, we are getting this. Now remember, we are getting this without any light source. All we are getting is the emission channel, which is kind of inbuilt inside of our Maya fluid, which is this incandescence. That's why we are seeing this glow. So I'm going to take physical sun and sky, and now see. So now you are seeing something like this, which looks pretty amazing. One thing I want to change in the physical sun and sky is adding more samples to our volume. Instead of having 1, I'm going to add 2, because we are dealing with volume here. And let's add a bit more samples, and I'm going to add some more exposure to value of 1. And there you go. If you don't want the background, you can turn it off by simply turning off the camera here, and this is what you're getting, right? So I'm gonna go back in here, and we can pretty much play around with the what color smoke you want. If you want a bit more white to something like this, you can have something like this, and adding a bit more black in here, or maybe having more input bias in here, you can do that. Totally up to you what kind of look you're going for. And one important thing to add in your rendering is, if you go down here, you'll see an Arnold tab, and here you'll find the step size. Now step size is one of the most important thing when you're dealing with volumes in Arnold. This determines the overall quality of your volumes, and reducing the number of step size will increase your quality of your render. So I'm going to go to maybe like 0.050 instead of 0.100, and this will just make your smoke look much better. So I'm gonna go even lower to maybe like 2, and I'm gonna remove this. And for the final thing, what I'm going to do is go to the render settings here, go to Arnold Render, and let's make this to 4, and we can have this 1 no transmission. Let's add a bit more volume samples here, and in the ray depth we are going to add more volume samples, so 5 for the volume and 1, and that's it. So right now this is a 1K, so I'm going to just render this out to see what we are getting. All right. Alright, so our final render is done and this is what it looks like. Pretty good. And again, this was 1K by 1K and it looks pretty nice, and we are using quite a low sampling here. As you can see, we have only 4 camera A samples. Make sure you have good amount of these if you are using or trying to get a really nice final render, apart from since I'm doing this for the video purpose, but you can increase it even more. Alright, so apart from this, if you want to use something different for your shading, like for example, what you can do is this is what you have. What you can do is, instead of using this, you can go for something a different color, maybe something like this. And I'm going to remove, let's keep it. Something like this. Let's keep the yellow. So you can use different type of variations and color as well. If you want a constant color, you can switch it to constant color, and whatever color here is will be the constant color. If you want, you can use that as well. Apart from that, you can use a lot of different things here. If you want to add one more marker, you can add in here and maybe change this to something like this, and let's bring it more about here, right? So again, you can have fun playing around with different type of color scheme, what you want with this. You can maybe add a much more edge drop of, if you want, maybe changing the amount of transparency, how much transparency you want in here, totally up to you. And let's bring this down, and let's bring this back. So yeah, there's a lot of different variation where you can play around with different kind of thing to get something creative out of your smoke. You can have just a duotone if you want. So have fun with this, play around with it. It's a pretty simple rendering Maya fluid with Arnold is pretty simple and a pretty straightforward technique. Actually, you don't have to mess around with a lot of different things to get a unique result. You can play around with the shading. Just make sure you have pretty lower step size when you're doing your final rendering, and you have more samples in your volume and camera A. Again, we are using a physical sun and sky in here. Maybe try having a different HDR to go with this, then you'll have much more better result. So maybe changing the overall light here, and maybe taking a directional light here and making the exposure to maybe like 2. Let's create an angle of drop of 1, and you can use this as well. So whatever you like, again, it's totally up to you. So have fun with this. It was a pretty straightforward technique, and a lot of people were asking for how to render Maya fluids with Arnold. So this was it. I hope this answered all your questions, and that's it for this one, and I'll see you in the next video.